Hello and welcome to the big picture. For years, Al-Qaeda has operated in different parts of the world with its biggest strike in the United States among other countries in the last decade or more. However, India did not seem to be on its radar all these years. Meanwhile, the breakaway group of the Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, which has been indulging in deadly activities in Syria and Iran, has challenged its parent organization. Now comes the news that Al-Qaeda is setting up or already set up operations in India or aimed at India, Bangladesh and Myanmar. The 55-minute video of Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, which has been making the rounds in the last 24 hours or so, has alerted intelligence agencies and governments all over the world, including in India. Is the threat which is posed to India and its neighbors, Bangladesh and Myanmar, a real one? What are the implications of this development on security situation in India? If Al-Qaeda indeed is setting up its operations in India, what are the reasons for it after having stayed away for so long? We will discuss all this today with Rana Banerji, Security Analyst and former Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat, Ansari, former Interlocutor on Jammu and Kashmir, Waiel Awaad, Senior Journalist and West Asian Analyst, Jayadev Ranade, former Additional Secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat, and Saikat Datta, Editor, National Security, Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Rana Banerji, I would like to come to you first. Is this some kind of a turf war between Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, or is this something which is, as far as India is concerned, a serious and a real threat?
It is a very serious threat, but it has actually stemmed from the franchisee war which has developed, which questioned Zawahiri's leadership. The younger elements have been veering to Iraq and to Syria, and they have been more impatient. They want quick results, and they get attracted to that group which is able to produce the most violent results. This also is reflecting the flow of funds, which again go to the more militant outfits. So ever since Osama bin Laden was killed, Zawahiri has been facing this problem, that he is considered an important ideologue, but who has not been able to convert his stature into demonstrable actions. So this is both a part of it. But then now that this disclosure has come, it would mean that we have to be very vigilant and careful and see the target groups which can be utilized by Zawahiri to create some such violent actions in India in the very near future.
Why do you think that in his in that video he brought in Mullah Omar and their loyalty to him? Why was that?
Yeah, it's a notional tutelage that he has acknowledged, which would indicate that his location still is somewhere in the Af-Pak border region. So he has paid obeisance to both Mullah Omar and to the handlers of both Afghan Taliban and the Tehrik-e-Taliban, which could be the ISI.
Okay. Saikat, it's quite interesting that all these years, nearly over 2 decades that Al-Qaeda has been operating in different parts of the world, they had not focused on India, they had not been able to, or either they were not interested, or they did not focus, or they did not find support here. How is it different now?
See, it's an interesting history, and Mr. Banerji can correct me, but I remember when the NIA had interrogated David Coleman Headley, and in that report there were some traces of some connection to the Al-Qaeda. For example, there used to be a gentleman called Mr. Ilyas Kashmiri who was part of a militant group called 313 Brigade, and 313 Brigade was suspected to have links with the Al-Qaeda at some point, and Ilyas Kashmiri was also interested in terrorism in India. But you have to understand that in India, terrorism has been mostly dominated by the Lashkar-e-Toiba and its various avatars. And they are very keen that none of the people they are trying to tap into, the fringe elements in India, they should go towards any other organization. And as Mr. Banerji said, it's always a fight about resources. So whoever is funding will fund those who are the most active. And Lashkar-e-Toiba and the 26/11 attack happened because they were very keen to ensure that the funding that they keep getting and the kind of play that they keep getting, their dominant role in South Asia as a terrorist organization continues and remains unchallenged. So therefore, they have also played a role in ensuring that Indian youth, etc., don't go to any other organizations, which we have actually seen change a bit with the IS, because the Islamic State has actually started attracting some kinds of Indian youth. Traditionally, youth in India have not gone for any international global terrorist organizations and have concentrated mostly in South Asia, which also works in favor of the Lashkar-e-Toiba. And I'm sure their handlers in the ISI wouldn't have wanted them to stray from that. But if things are changing and a new virulent group is coming up which is promising to be more active, that could change to a certain extent.
Okay, Mr. Ranade, you think that this change is happening, that new groups are coming up, LET, Lashkar-e-Toiba is losing ground on this, because of that?
Not entirely. I think the Lashkar-e-Toiba remains active, as do the other outfits. But the Al-Qaeda, this new India chapter, yes. Two of its leaders are Pakistanis. Two of its chief leaders are Pakistanis. And
they've been named. I mean, it's like some corporates, bringing in new leadership and making an announcement.
Board of directors, and that's what they're doing. But I think what we are going to see is a more virulent form of action inside India. There have been elliptical references by this Al-Qaeda group in the video, claiming that they have been involved in activity in the past, and they refer to 26/11,
right,
very obliquely. But that's a claim. But I think as far as India is concerned, we have to watch out for two things. One is this, and the second is the Islamic State, which as a rival also claims a kind of a desire to establish a caliphate which includes large chunks of India and Bangladesh and parts of China. So I think we're going to see a lot more money coming in here, and that I would identify as a real threat for us, which could tempt our youth to join these ranks.
Awaad, what is happening in the Islamic State, the ISIS, and now it is known as just IS? Has it become such a threat to the Al-Qaeda that Al-Qaeda is now needs to come out with these kind of sensational statements, or as our other panelists say, that it may actually be real also?
Well, with respect to what has been said before, but let me just clarify a point, because Al-Qaeda and ISIS is the two sides of the same coin. These are the same people who have been recruited by the Al-Qaeda, who have been sent in Musab al-Zarqawi, right, who was also created Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and after which they have had difference with him in the ideology of implementing their own statehood, or what so-called of the Islamic State they have already propagating for. So when they disowned him, he formed ISIS in Iraq, and his successor al-Baghdadi and then Abu Bakr had come and taken over, and then they spread it to Syria and they have taken down. Now what I am trying to say here is this is the products of Al-Qaeda, and all of us know who created Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And I think we have to ask ourselves here again, look, you can't bite us from the same wound twice. You have already said Al-Qaeda was here. Now again you are saying Al-Qaeda here. Give me the proof. I think what we need to ask ourselves here as in India has to have its own independent investigation system into this, and send its own people into the ground where these people are flourishing, and then come up with
whether they are flourishing.
Yes, flourishing in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, because now the vacuum will be created after the ISAF and the US pull their troops from Afghanistan. These are the vacuum, these are the contingency plan Indian government has to take. If you listen to the West, you have already sold us one lie. You cannot sell us twice the lie for the same people. Al-Qaeda or IS is the same people whom you recruited them, you nourished them in Afghanistan, you armed them, funded them, and then you sent them to Syria.
What are you trying to say? You are trying to say that even now, after this break which has happened between Al-Qaeda and this new Islamic State, they still continue to operate on similar lines? Or
absolutely, they are on the similar line, because only the implementation was different.
Then why do you think Zawahiri had to come out with this kind of a statement? Does it not sound like some kind of a turf war, or as Banerji calls it a franchisee war?
It is. You see, this is what we call the mobile anarchy. They have created the anarchy in the Arab world. It was first anarchy, then mobile anarchy. Now, in India, they are creating in the similar fashion to make a threat here. Why? Because we have Afghani, we have Pakistanis, we have Bangladeshis, we have people fighting inside the ISIS in Syria and Iraq. This is the people, they have differentiation on the ideology of implementing. And again, correct me here. Why? Because Bin Laden did not want to attack the minorities and the other sect of Islam and implement the government. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi went for that one. That is the different. Otherwise, Otherwise, both of them are doing the same havoc, either doing the same Islamophobia across the world to bring back again the global fight against terrorism, that there is a global threat. How can you, if we are not naive to understand that they don't have a ballistic missile, they don't have F-16, they don't have Apache, they don't have nuclear bomb, they don't have even biological bomb, they have no airplane, yet they are the most dangerous people on the ground. And now the rest of the world want us to believe that this creation of the West in the Arab world is not the same people who have created in South Asia. It's the same. They are playing with us at the same. We need to have an independent, our own investigation to deal with such kind and tackle such kind of a threat. It is India. I have been living in this part of the world for more than 3 decades. I covered extensively. We have not seen any of Al-Qaeda anywhere, even in Afghanistan or even fighting in Kashmir along the Pakistani line for long years. Now, why this suddenly is happening?
Exactly. Why, Mr. Banerji?
Well, basically, they are hoping to target the sullenness of the Indian Muslim, which has been brewing for a while. And the target group would be...
Would you agree with him that
not entirely that this is a Western, creation. Perhaps, possibly, it may have been in Afghanistan to begin with. But now I think things have moved on. And there is this ideological rift between Jawahiri and Baghdadi, particularly on the sectarianism of the new Al-Qaeda franchises. Jawahiri has appealed for not killing Shias, not killing civilians. And this again is following from the ideological dictums of Osama bin Laden. But in India, when we assess the threat, we have to focus on the target group of the Indian Mujahideen and its various modules in different parts of the country. So and they are sullen Indian Muslims who have...
So you're saying that Indian Mujahideen, about which itself there has been doubts about whether it's existent, not existent. There has been a lot of discussions in this country about that. So they are the ones who will be targeted as recruits for this?
Certainly. There are different modules that are there. Some have been targeted, they have been broken up due to the recent arrests of, Yasin Bhatkal, Abu Jundal, Monu Akhtar, Tehsim. But new modules are sprouting up, you never know. In Muradabad or in UP, Darbhanga, Pune, Hyderabad. So we have to see to what extent the Indian Muslim is brought into an inclusive development model. If that happens, then we can put this.
That is the question. Mr. Ansari, how would you look at it? You have interacted very extensively with people in Kashmir. It's very interesting that in this video of Zawahiri's, he brings in he says Bangladesh, Myanmar, India, and in India he talks about Kashmir, he talks about Gujarat, he talks about Ahmedabad, he talks about Assam. What do you think is the motive behind this?
Well, this is indeed a very interesting question. Why is it that the Al-Qaeda has, I think, for the first time taken India and the Indian subcontinent on its radar?
Yes.
There are issues that have been raised by my colleagues here, and I think there has been Muslim and non-Muslim communal violences in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, beginning from Burma, Bangladesh, Muzaffarnagar, Ahmedabad, and Jammu and Kashmir, etc. So one reason is, of course, there has been some communal disturbances on this part, and that has also created some kind of exclusiveness, of which Mr. Banerji also made a mention of it. Then recently we also heard of through media that a number of Indian Muslim youth were recruited and they were sent elsewhere for fighting and participating in Syria and elsewhere.
Yes.
That also becomes another reason. And at the same time, we see that recently in the context of Kashmir, we had cancellation of dialogue, and then skirmishes on the borders have also increased, and therefore we also foresee elections in the Jammu and Kashmir in the next few months, and there are attempts by the political parties to polarize the voters on different communal lines. So I see that the Al-Qaeda, which is now seeing the new leadership coming up, and the new leadership is also finding the new grounds for attracting funding, resources, and also the arms and ammunition which is being supported by the Western countries, whether you can say that the Saudi and the allies may be providing the money, but at the same time, the arms and ammunition that is provided by the Western world. So they find a larger and the bigger market, and that is why it seems that they are trying to capture this area also, because this becomes an important battlefield. So, I mean, there are reasons, both. One, the new leadership that is emerging, and they would like to create their own, the market for themselves, and at the same time, the funding agencies, the funding sources have also been trying to have an eye on the problems that are being faced by the people in this part of the country. But at the same time, I think, what we see as, I think Mr. Banerji made a mention of it, the marginalization of certain groups, certain communities, especially when he mentioned about the marginalization of the Muslims and the youth. If they are not included in the mainstream, it will be much easier to radicalize them, it will be much easier to influence them, tell them that, look, the secular and the democratic values is of no use to you, and therefore they will ultimately participate in this kind of activities. In fact, in the context of J&K that you mentioned to me, yes. When I interacted with large number of people who were not the pro-government, they particularly mentioned that they are not able to participate in the political processes, they are not able to take advantage of the economic benefits, and therefore they had taken the guns in their own hand. So, the marginalization and lack of inclusiveness in the economic and the political processes are, I think, the sole reason for indulging and participating in some such activities which are considered to be the anti
Okay, Mr. Ranade, how do you look at this? This is what he says in Burma, Bangladesh, Assam, Gujarat, Ahmedabad and Kashmir. The new wing would rescue Muslims there from injustice and oppression. So they have created this situation which is specifically talking about these places. So they seem to have an agenda, right? The agenda is quite clear for them, and the motive seems to be quite clear for them.
Exactly. I think they've identified areas where they think there's a reservoir of sullen youth. And as Mr. Rana Banerji said, there needs to be a policy of inclusiveness or trying to get them in. But that's something which is going to take a while. It can't happen immediately. And they're banking on the fact that they'll be able to fish in troubled waters right away. And as I said, they have a lot of money, which is, I think, what they're going to use to try and get this youth over. So these are the belts that they're looking at just now, but it will expand depending on the kind of success they get. The second thing is that in these areas that they have identified, they are going to operate outside the traditional hunting grounds of the LET, HM, JEM, etc. So that's a new factor that is going to come in. And I think, as Rana said also, the extremist groups that already exist will be the special points of attention for this new Al-Qaeda India chapter.
Okay, Saikat, how would you look at it politically? Now, already there have been certain analysts talking about this being a direct threat to the Prime Minister himself, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. These specific bringing in specific states like Gujarat, and he talks of Gujarat and Ahmedabad as if they are two different states. Obviously, he has a problem with the geography there. But when he talks of Gujarat, Ahmedabad, Kashmir, Assam, so what do you think they are trying to do?
Okay, let me put together some different strands and bring it together with one factual input. First of all, this is not the first time that the Al-Qaeda has talked about India. I remember in 2002 or 2003, US Special Forces had raided a base known as the Sinjar base of the Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had found documents and laptops, and in some of those documents there were references to India, because India is always viewed as one of the caliphates which ruled the world, and therefore within their ideology, the Al-Qaeda or their offshoots always look at India as a caliphate which will re-emerge, and therefore they will all rule the earth in the way the caliphates used to rule. So we have been on their radar for a long time. It's another matter that they have not been able to make much headway. Now let's look at what's happening in the subcontinent or in South Asia. In July, there was a huge ambush of Burmese troops by the Rohingya Muslim militant outfits, where my understanding is almost 35 of their troops were killed. Now that is the kind of people and the capability that is emerging in this part of the world. So when you have this kind of capability and there is a certain feeling of alienation and a certain feeling of anger, that is something that these militant outfits, these terrorist outfits would be very keen to exploit and draw people to their side. As far as threats are concerned, the attack on our consulate in Herat is a very good example of what exactly people are planning. Because if you remember, on the day that the Prime Minister was being sworn in, they had tried to destabilize that, and this was done completely with the help of the Pakistani ISI to ensure that the Indian government faces a massive challenge even before it was sworn in as a government, to ensure that they would take hostages and they would keep the pressure up on us. Luckily, because of some good CISF and ITPP Jawans, they were unsuccessful in that. But the intention is extremely clear, that you continue to fish in troubled waters in India and the neighborhood, and increase their cadres, so that their dreams of establishing or re-establishing a caliphate is realized in this part of the world.
But Saikat, you know, how, so this whole business of fighting injustice and oppression is just a, what do you call it, a smokescreen?
See, it's not exactly a smokescreen, because there is a certain sense of alienation, and as far as I know, security agencies have been doing studies on ground which shows that radicalization in this country is actually on the rise. And when you also have feelings of alienation from the mainstream, or you feel that you are not being represented, like for example in this parliament, for the first time we have the lowest number of Muslim MPs ever in the history of this country. Now these on ground translate into feelings of alienation from the mainstream. If we are not able to address this in a meaningful manner, we'll just be producing people who will be very happy to join and in their view fight back against their perception of injustice.
Mr. Ansari, would you agree with Saikat on that? And you know, has there been any concerted effort? You know, you have been part of those processes in Kashmir, but later also you have been interacting with people in the government in the past and things like that. What kind of a concerted effort is on at the government's level, at various levels of the administration, to ensure that this kind of alienation doesn't take place?
Well, there are policies and the programs beginning from the independence of the country, but unfortunately the Muslims by and large have been lagging behind as compared to the other communities. So while there are certain definite policies, and those policies they try to mainstream the Muslims through employment, education and other activities, but unfortunately, as you know, the earlier speaker has pointed out, the representation in the government has all along been one of the lowest, and for the first time even in the Lok Sabha representation is very low. And this message has gone far and wide, not only within this country but elsewhere also. And therefore, as I said in the beginning, that the organizations like Al-Qaeda, they find the newer ground, you know, to sell themselves, also to make themselves relevant in these parts where the marginalization and the alienation among the minorities is very high. And therefore, I think this is an issue which is to be reconsidered and see as to how to contain the marginalization or alienation among the minorities, and at the same time also to make sure that how to increase their participation in the political and economic processes, so that you know, they could effectively be mainstream, and the radicalization of any kind that is taking place, that could also be stopped. But you know, at this point of time, I must mention that India doesn't have much of the threat from the outside agencies, you know, Al-Qaeda or ISI, but I see that there are homegrown terror activities, whether you call it jihadis, whether you call it the Saffron terror, whether you call it Naxal or Maoist. I think India needs to tackle these internal issues, and if they are effectively dealt with, much of the problem coming from the external forces could be easily contained, because our effort to make sure that the alienation within is contained, that will ensure that the external forces are not able to influence the minds of the people. And therefore, it is very much important that while we do promote and propagate secular and the democratic values, you know, at the same time it is important that it should be effectively implemented, so that everybody feels that there is a future in the country.
Okay, Awaad, you know, do you see the same kind of reasons why these kind of extremist activities are taking place? For instance, if you compare what's happening in India now and what is happening in your regions, say in Syria or Iraq or places like that, are the reasons the same for recruitment or, fundamentalization of people or, this kind of situation?
The most unfortunate part, yes, because of unemployment, because of the poverty. There are people also, ideologically driven people, and you people must have allowed many of those who came and propagated the wrong teaching and felt that they have been alienated from the nation. But let me put it straightforward here. India is a system, is a governing system. As long as you have freedom of media, you have a jurisdiction system strong, you have also a good governing body, and these are the issues. When you have a speed of justice, then you do not have people to be alienated and joining this kind of dark forces. What is the new trend in this is very rightly it should be pointed here. Therefore, before they used to say they were sending people to Syria and Iraq, IS to recruit, and from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan and all this part of the world go and join, even Indonesia, Malaysia. Now they wanted these people to work within their country, and this is the most important part. This is also a clear indication to raise the fear among the public and to increase the fear among the public, to create a public opinion that yes, there is a monster coming to this country. I think the people of India are well educated, and I'm not saying it just out of the diplomatic line. No, they understand, and unless and until the government really do a good governance, and there has to be there. You have to look at it from the Pakistani development. Are the army coming back to power? Are we going to see Ziaul-Haq again in Pakistan? Then we will have the flourishing of Al-Qaeda. Are we going to see what's going on in Hamas in Palestinian territory, what the Israelis and the Americans reached to a settlement there? Are we going to see the Iranian from the other side dealing with the nuclear P5 and all +1? So there is a point, if you look at it from the wider perspective, yes, it is a threat. It's building a global war against terrorism again. But unless and until you cut down on the sources of this funding, who is arming, who is funding, who is sending the training them, where are these sources, then you can never deal with it. A selectivity of dealing with terrorism does not give you the eradication of radicalism.
Okay, that is interesting, Mr. Ranade. My question is that it's a direct question, because already people have started, linking what has happened in India in the recent past and saying that, is the formation of the new government in India become has been the motivation for this kind of development which has happened, or is it something which has been in the pipeline and now this formation of a new government has given a fillip to it?
I think I would go more with the second bit of your comment. There have been references to India in the past, as I have said, but I think here there are 2 points that we need to keep in mind. One is this effort, and I call this a recruitment pitch which he's come out with, has come at a time when there is a new government here. It's a government which some people or some, I think very few, perceive as a government which may not be that sensitive to the needs of certain minority groups. But it is also a government which is emphasizing economic development and growth. And if you have a few spectacular actions here, terrorist actions, which is what the Al-Qaeda specializes in, I think their calculation is that they would be able to disrupt or delay this growth. And that seems to be their target.
Mr. Banerji?
Well, I'll substantially agree with what Jayadev is saying. It's a question of perception management and how soon the concept of good governance can be delivered to bring an inclusive picture to this, sullen resentment that is prevailing among the target community.
Saikat, very quickly, last words. The formation of a new government, how much has it been responsible for this kind of a development? And some of the developments which are happening in
so I don't think the formation... The formation of the new government has not contributed to this at all, because the government certainly wouldn't want a problem like this. But there are conditions and there are perceptions which these militant groups are working on, and unless those perceptions are addressed effectively and immediately, there could be a major problem. And my understanding is the inputs that we have received in the last few months, people are already planning major strikes in India.
Okay, on that, it's quite a dreadful note on that which we need to end, but this is a warning. It's pretty obvious that all my panelists agree that this is a threat which is being posed by this new development, is a serious threat and needs to be taken seriously. And like all my panelists have said, that it is not just the counter-terrorism action that you can take, but there are several other issues which needs to be dealt with it to ensure that Indians don't get recruited into this kind of these kind of organizations. Thanks to all my guests. M. Ansari, Rana Banerji, Waiel, Awaad, Jayadev, Ranade and Saikat Datta. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in Big Picture same time tomorrow.